Welcome to the Explainer. So over the next 7 minutes or so, we're going to build a really wholesome understanding of a sneaky, quiet mechanism that's probably draining your energy literally right now, without you even realizing it. We're talking about silent stress. It's not a blaring fire alarm, it's more like a silent leak. So let's just dive right in and uncover how this whole thing actually works.
Let me ask you something right off the bat. Are you actually stressed, or are you just functioning? Honestly, I kind of want to challenge your baseline today. We so often assume that, hey, if we're getting out of bed, commuting to work, and firing off emails, we must be totally fine, right? But what if what you consider just normal everyday life is actually a hidden, incredibly heavy load?
See, loud stress is what we're all trained to look out for. It's the panic attacks, breaking down those unavoidable internal alarms. But silent stress, it is a completely different beast. It's that constant mental fog, having super shallow energy, or just carrying around tension that you've simply stopped noticing. Listen, just because there's no visible panic absolutely doesn't mean your system isn't under some major strain.
Okay, think of a Lahore rickshaw for a second. Now, from the outside, you look at it and it might seem perfectly fine. It's moving down the street, the engine's puttering along, but what you don't see is this unseen weight just pressing down, little by little, constantly straining that tiny engine. And you know what? People carry heavy mental loads exactly like this. You look fine on the outside, while this pressure just silently pushes down on you.
So what's actually happening here? Well, silent stress is basically a body and mind response to pressure, but it stays totally hidden because, get this, you normalize it, you adapt to it. This isn't just a fleeting feeling, it's a systemic response. It stays completely under the radar because your brain is literally built to adapt to your environment. It actively turns off the warning bells just so you can keep on functioning. It's kind of like walking into a room with a really noisy fan. When you first step in, that hum is, incredibly annoying, right? But give it 10 minutes. Your brain basically acts like a spam filter and just tunes the whole thing out. Now, the fan didn't actually become silent, you just adapted to the noise. And your body? It does the exact same thing with chronic tension.
Honestly, we probably treat our smart devices better than ourselves when it comes to this. You know when your phone screen looks completely normal, everything's bright, but that battery percentage up in the corner is just free-falling? Silent stress works exactly like that. The outside shell looks perfectly fine, but those indirect warning signs, like suddenly needing way more effort just to do ordinary, everyday things, they're rapidly draining your internal reserves.
This physical adaptation, well, it's basically like wearing a shoe that's just a tiny bit too tight. On day one, yeah, it hurts. It's really annoying. But if you wear it every single day, your foot kind of adjusts its expectations. You just stop noticing the discomfort as sharply. And that's exactly what happens when stress rises gradually. Our minds literally adjust themselves to accept discomfort as the new normal baseline.
And here's the tricky part. High functioning can so easily disguise a low reserve. Imagine a leaky water tank. I mean, as long as the water is still flowing out of the tap, you're probably going to completely ignore the leak, right? Highly capable people mask silent stress precisely like this, by secretly borrowing their energy from tomorrow. Because they aren't actually failing to function, they totally mask that steady internal leak.
Oh, and our minds are incredibly good at making excuses to protect us from realizing this is even happening. We tell ourselves things like, oh, I'm just busy, or, it's just a rough week. I'll feel better after I finish this one project. When our attention gets pulled inward by all that mental friction, our mind immediately jumps in to explain away the strain. Why? To preserve our ability to keep functioning, which unfortunately keeps us completely in the dark.
Okay, to really understand how this builds up over time, we have to look at what I'd call the ultimate math of burnout: demand versus recovery. It's pretty simple. Demand is whatever life is asking from you right now. Recovery is what gives you back your steadiness. So stress accumulates quietly simply when that demand consistently outpaces your recovery. It doesn't need a massive crisis, it just requires a persistent imbalance.
Now, when that imbalance happens, your system actually sends signals across 3 different levels. In the body, maybe it shows up as really tight shoulders or shallow breathing. In the mind, it hits you as brain fog or forgetfulness. And in your behavior, it's that sudden irritability or wanting to withdraw. You might just think, hey, I'm just in a weird mood today. But no, these are just different languages your body is using to communicate the exact same underlying strain.
And you know what a massive contributor to all this strain is? Uncertainty. The human body fundamentally dislikes unresolved situations. Think of a really watchful security guard who never gets told when their shift is supposed to end.
they're going to stay on high alert way longer than necessary. Our bodies do the exact same thing with daily uncertainties. And let me tell you, staying in that half-ready state is biologically very, very expensive.
The crazy thing is, this uncertainty rarely just stays in one place. It triggers what we call a cascade effect. So first, that body strain drops your sleep quality. Because you slept poorly, your recovery tanks, which obviously drops your energy. Suddenly, regular everyday tasks feel so much heavier. And guess what? Heavier tasks create even more stress. It becomes this brutal, self-reinforcing loop that just amplifies the whole load.
I absolutely love this analogy from the source material. Think of driving a car in first gear for way too long. Look, the stress response is fantastic for short-term mobilization, right? Popping it into first gear gets you moving. But man, if you keep the engine in first gear permanently, you are wasting an immense amount of energy and putting a heavy, heavy strain on the whole machine.
To really ground this in reality, let's just look at ordinary pressure. Say you're in a bustling, chaotic place like Lahore. Managing your work, family expectations, the literal endless stream of WhatsApp messages, it perfectly disguises a steady drain. What does it actually look like? It looks like having way shorter patience at home, slower thinking by the evening, feeling totally drained before the day is even over, or honestly needing serious effort just to stay socially present with your friends.
So, the real danger here, it isn't one isolated symptom, it's the pattern. I mean, one bad night of sleep proves absolutely nothing, but a consistent cluster of small costs that travel together, we're talking tiredness that sleep somehow doesn't fix, focus that suddenly takes extra effort, feeling constantly on edge, well, that moving pattern, that is your true warning sign right there.
Which brings us to the full system loop. It's kind of the quiet, dark magic of burnout. The pressure enters, and your system brilliantly adapts so you can keep functioning. But because you adapt so well, all those helpful warning bells get completely muted. So your internal reserve quietly drains out, and the effects slowly, silently spread into your sleep, your mood, and your overall focus.
And this leads us to what we call the shift. We absolutely have to stop asking ourselves, am I stressed enough for this to count? Instead, we need to ask, what is this pattern doing to my steadiness over time? By just changing that one question, you stop the self-blame, you can accurately acknowledge your very real limits, and ultimately, you get your power back.
I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Are you waiting for your stress to get really, really loud before you take it seriously? Or will you choose to notice the quiet pattern today? Just remember, quiet stress is still real stress. You do not need to have a total breakdown just to validate your experience. Early awareness is exactly where true steadiness begins. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and seriously, take a moment to just check your own baseline today. Catch you next time.